This goes back to a report by the Spanish budget watchdog. They indicated that in November 2024, they used budget credits, which is not necessarily European funded per se, but it was connected to a clause in relation to the RFF, which of course is the recovery fund put together by the European Union, paid for, of course, by joint debt backed by the EU 27. The Spanish government told Euronews, and they told myself, sources very close to the Spanish economy ministry, that they categorically deny that European money is being used to pay for pensions. They say this is not the case. They also told me, and as I understand, the European Commission did ask for an explanation. They did ask for a clarification. After Spain provided a technical explanation saying this is an accounting issue, the Commission does not indicate that there is any wrongdoing or misuse of funding, but nonetheless, this is politics and this is about the optics. The damage to some extent is already done, and Maeve, we should keep in mind this is coming right before negotiations around the European budget kickstart, and of course is already fueling some of the tensions between the southern European countries and some of the frugal countries, northern European countries, which traditionally, historically have said they do not want a big budget and they do not want joint funding to become permanent.
Debate that never goes away. Marina Stale, thank you so much for that very comprehensive analysis there. And now moving on to the ongoing war in Ukraine. This weekend, in response to a major attack on Kyiv, Ukraine's largest drone strike so far hit Russia, killing at least 4 people, including 3 near Moscow and wounding a dozen others. Debris fell on Russia's largest airport, causing disruptions but no damage. For more, we're joined here in the studio by our Ukraine correspondent, that's of course Sasha Vakalina. Tell us more about this attack on Russia.
Yes, indeed. As you said, this was one of the largest attacks. In fact, according to Russian officials, it was the largest when it comes to Moscow in over a year. Kyiv confirmed the attack, saying they specifically targeted military, industrial and fuel infrastructure in Moscow region, including a plant which produces semiconductors for Russia's military industrial complex, also 2 pumping stations in Moscow, oil a refinery. Now, Russian authorities said the residential building was also damaged during the attack. According to Russia's defense ministry, in general, they have intercepted allegedly over 1,000 drones on Russia. That was, according to the to Moscow officials, that was the scale of this attack. And of course, this is not the furthest attack that Ukraine did in terms of the long-range distance, but it was very significant given that this is indeed Russia's capital.
Yeah, it's very rare, and I'm sure viewers this morning are thinking the same. Why do they target Moscow?
Well, for Kyiv, that was a clear demonstration of its capabilities. This is a very clear and simple message that Kyiv can reach Moscow if it wants to. Moscow, of course, being Russia's most protected city in terms of air defense. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, he did call it entirely justified, and he also tweeted about the attack, saying our responses to Russia's prolongation of the war and its attacks on our cities and communities are entirely justified. Ukrainian long-range sanctions reached the Moscow region, and we are clearly telling the Russians their state must end its war. Now, what he means here is, of course, the attack last week on Kyiv when the residential building was hit and 24 people were killed in that Russian attack. Volodymyr Zelensky, in this case, is sending the message that he can indeed move Russia's war back to Russia's territory. And we can see the effect of it given the scale of the fear and also all these videos on social media by Moscow residents showing that attack.
Okay, Sasha Vakalina, thank you so much for that update. Now, moving on to the Middle East, where a drone strike has triggered a fire near a nuclear plant in the United Arab Emirates. The incident that has been condemned by the region and the International Atomic Energy Agency highlights just how fragile the ceasefire between the US and Iran really is. For more, we can head straight over to Qatar, where our correspondent Adel Halim is standing by for us this morning. Tell us, what is the latest on this nuclear plant bombing, Adel?
Yeah, Maeve, this is really the kind of incident that Gulf countries were hoping to avoid. While the ceasefire is still technically in place, clearly tensions never went away. Now, what happened on Sunday was a drone hit the perimeter of the Baraka power plant in the UAE, just outside the, which roughly supplies about a quarter of the country's energy. Now, according to Emirati officials, now 3 drones entered UAE airspace from the west and hit the electrical generator outside the main facility, sparking a fire. Now, the Abu Dhabi media office was quick to report there was no radiation leak, no injuries reported. In fact, the generators were continuing to operate as normally, but even without casualties, this is hugely symbolic. Any attack on a nuclear facility raises serious questions, and while the UAE didn't publicly blame Iran, analysts do say this was a warning shot as regional tensions continue to escalate once again. Dave?
And Adele, President Trump and Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi have reacted to this. We can actually together take a listen to what they have to say.
I could say this with very, very strong conviction. Iran will never have a nuclear weapon. Not going to happen. They have no Navy, no Air Force, no anti-anything. By the way, we knocked out 85% of their manufacturing for missiles.
An attack on our nuclear facilities has already taken place once, and they claim they completely destroyed them. Yet now they're once again talking about attacking the facilities. These contradictory statements truly indicate the depth of America's confusion regarding their objectives in this war.
So as you can see, their tensions have clearly not gone away, and we're also hearing, Adele, that Israel and the US are planning to renew the war. What can you tell us?
Yeah, those comments really accentuate where we stand right now. Publicly, both sides are calling for diplomacy, but at the same time, they're preparing for the eventuality of a possibility of what could come next. Iranian officials have openly said that during the ceasefire, they were able to regroup and restock their strike systems. Meanwhile, military activity across the region hasn't slowed down. U.S. Central Command says American naval forces continuing their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. And as of Sunday, it says 81 commercial vessels were redirected and 4 disabled. And as you mentioned, there are reports that Israel and the U.S. are coordinating future strikes if negotiations fail. To that end, U.S. President Donald Trump doubled down on his Truth Social account, saying for Iran, the clock is ticking and they better get moving fast or there won't be anything left of them. Time is of the essence. So right now we're seeing technically the ceasefire still holds, but all parties are bracing for the possibility of what could come next. Dave?
Okay, very stressful time, of course, there for your region and the world. Thank you so much for that update there, Adele Khali. And now moving on from the Netherlands to Sweden and then on to Oslo and Rome. India's Narendra Modi is on a whistle-stop tour across Europe, sitting down with various European leaders. After hosting foreign ministers from BRIC countries just last Friday, he's here to celebrate, of course, the historic EU-India deal signed earlier this year. For more on what to expect from his trip, here's our Jakob Janis.
Have you ever wondered how the world's fastest growing major economy manages a crisis at home while reshaping global trade? While New Delhi scrambles to protect a sinking rupee hit by energy shocks from the Iran war, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is launching a massive diplomatic offensive across Europe. And months after a historic EU-India free trade agreement, this tour executes that mother of all deals by balancing Brussels with individual capitals. And if we follow the Prime Minister's itinerary day by day, the calendar reveals exactly what's at stake. And over the weekend, Modi met with Dutch Prime Minister Rob Jetten. The Netherlands is a key trading partner for India, with bilateral trade worth nearly $28 billion. And the immediate prize is an $11 billion semiconductor deal between Tata Electronics and Dutch giant ASML to build a cutting-edge microchip plant in Western India. And it is a textbook example of Europe's China Plus One strategy, as Western companies rush to diversify supply chains away from Beijing. And now the focus shifts to Sweden, where today Modi is meeting Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen at the European Roundtable for Industry. And here is a side note. While capitals like Stockholm provide India with specific tech, defense, and green transition deals, Brussels provides here the regulatory alignment and massive tariff cuts needed to unlock the entire European market. But hey, that's not all. Tomorrow, Modi attends the India-Nordic Summit in Oslo, engaging Nordic leaders on clean energy and Arctic shipping routes opened up by climate change. And this grand tour will conclude on Wednesday in Italy with Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, where both leaders will focus on maritime security and a joint action plan for legal migration channels. And I know, it sounds complex, but one thing is certain. For European leaders facing slowing economies, rolling out the red carpet is no longer a luxury. It is a strategic necessity. and the world's most populous nation becomes an indispensable geopolitical counterweight when Europe's historic partners look away.
Jakub Janis there for us. And now for the view from Finland, coming up, we'll be joined by Ville Tavio, Finnish Minister for Foreign Trade and Development, in Brussels today for talks with ministers from all across the EU. Ville Tavio is a member of the National Conservative Finns Party and he's been active in national politics for several years. Good morning, Minister. Lovely to have you with us.
Good morning, great to be here.
So first, we're of course looking at those pictures of the Indian head of state travelling all across Europe. This comes just after that big historic deal was signed. What's Finland's view here? What's your view here?
Well, the Finnish president also had a state visit to India a couple months ago. And it's absolutely one strategic partnership in order to diverse the trade.
And tell me, it comes just a couple of days after India hosted BRICS foreign ministers. So is there anything the European Union can do to put pressure on India to help end the war in Ukraine?
I really hope so, of course, and that's one of the reasons that Finland thinks it's important to have these close relations. But I would say that rather recently we've seen development in the trade and the quest in diversification of trade and China Plus One mission instead of focusing only in these difficult topics.
Of course, you had that drone incident on Friday, which seems to have been settled. But let's talk about this big week for the EU-US trade deal that could get over the line by June. But in the European Parliament, we're seeing a lot of different debates. There'll be trilogues this week, so negotiations on whether or not to put conditions on this deal that, of course, as you know, is pretty controversial. But putting conditions on it at this late stage, could that not anger President Donald Trump? What is your view here?
Well, we are in favor of forcing what's agreed, and we see cautious optimism that the trilogues are moving very well, to my knowledge. So after all, we want to create bridges and not to burn bridges. So.
But do you trust President Trump? He can be very unpredictable and cause a lot of stress for European businesses and Finnish businesses.
We are not expecting predictability from him, but I think he's a hard negotiator. I think it's debatable whether USA has kind of benefited from his actions. Maybe we'll see that at the end of his term. But from the Europe's point of view, we want to keep on the trade growing. We want to build a steady trade. That's what the companies need.
But if Donald Trump plays hardball, should the Europeans play hardball too?
Yes, me and several other ministers, we've taken stances before, whereas we think the European Union should have used the package we made in order to pressure USA more. But at this point, we are ready to move forward with the deal as agreed, and of course our requirement is that the USA also respects this deal.
And a big week as well for the EU. They're heading to Mexico this week. Could a deal be signed there? We know the last EU-Mexico summit was back in 2015.
Yes, we are looking for renewing the global treaty with EU-Mexico. And that's I mean, it's a very important point. You know, we have the Mercosur trade deal already applied. So that doesn't include Mexico, so it's very good that we get a new deal with Mexico as well. It's our second largest partner in the Latin America.
And meanwhile, of course, big focus of your talks this week on the impact the ongoing war in the Middle East is having on Europeans. Do you think enough has been done by Brussels, i.e. the European Commission, in order to soften that blow on Europeans?
Well, from the trade minister point of view, I can tell that the past 3 years that I've been a minister of trade, it's the security concerns have been rising all the time. So I think trade ministers are more dealing with the security concerns and increasingly involved in the security issues. So whether it's diversification of trade, but also energy, basic supply chains, now wartime discomforts.
Okay, Minister, thank you so much for coming into us here today on Euronews and being our guest on Europe Today. That does bring, though, this edition of Europe Today to an end. Any points, comments, questions for us, you can always reach out at europetoday@euronews.com. But for now, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, and do visit euronews.com for more news and analysis.
Magandang tanghali po.
Oras na para sa may init na balita.
Patay ang isang lalaking senior citizen matapos masalpok ng pick-up sa Quezon City.
Nakapila noon ang biktima sa labas ng tanggapan ng Bureau of Animal Industry para sana makabili ng 20 pesos kada kilong bigas. Balita natin ni James Agustin.
Kalunos-lunos ang sinapit ng isang senior citizen na nasalpok ng pickup sa Visayas Avenue, Quezon City bago mag alas 4 ng umaga kanina. Ang biktima naghihintay sa labas ng tanggapan ng Bureau of Animal Industry para makabili ng 20 pesos na bigas. Naisugod pa ang 73 taong gulang na biktima sa ospital pero namatay kalaunan. Ayon sa isang saksi, nakaupo sa bangketa ang biktima nang mangyari ang aksidente. Nakaladkad pa siya ng ilang metro.
Mabilis yung sasakyan, tapos sumadsad siya dito sa nahagip na tao. Tapos pag hagip niya, di ba, tumalsik yung tao, gumanyan doon niya talaga ibinangga. Doon sa punti na yun. Dalawa ang paa niya na durog, tapos yung kamay, durog din. Maraming sugat sa noo.
Nahagip din ang sasakyan ng 51 taong gulang na si Richard na nagtitinda sa bangketa. Nagtamo siya ng sugat sa kanang siko.
Paglingon ko uli, nasa akin na, kaya yan, may tama. Dito tinamaan ako. Kung hindi ko na itulak yung sidecar ko, yung paninda ko, baka pati ako nasa pool. Papasalamat din ako, di ba, ang buhay ko na to.
Sa investigasyon ng pulisya, galing sa Isabel ang driver ng pickup at pauwi na sa Kulya. Unang nabangga ng sasakyan ng senior citizen.
Sa kasamaang palad, nawala ng control yung driver natin at nasagasaan niya po yung nakaupong biktima sa gutter ng in front of Bureau of Animal Industry. After niyang mabangga yung biktima, nagtuloy-tuloy yung driver at sumampa sa gutter, sir.
Doon na nahagipan nagtitinda at tinamaan din ang traffic signage sa bike lane. Sa lakas ng impact, nawasak ang harapang kanang bahagi ng sasakyan. Nasa kusudian ng QCPD Traffic Sector 6 ang 47 taong gulang na driver ng pickup na tumanggi magbigay ng pahayag. Pero base sa kanyang salaysay sa pulisya,
According sa driver po, may iniwasan siyang motorsiklo na tumawid sa lugar. Pero iniimbestigahan pa po natin yun.
Maharap ang driver sa reklamong reckless imprudence resulting in homicide and damage of property. James Agustin, nagbabalita para sa GMA News.
Itataas uli sa yellow alert ang Visayas Grid mamayang hapon hanggang gabi. Ibig sabihin, manipis ulit ang reserbang kuryente na posibleng magkulang sakaling magka-emergency. Ayon sa National Grid Corporation of the Philippines, magsisimula yan mamayang alas 5 ng hapon hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Paliwanag ng NGCP, inaasahan ang mataas na demand sa kuryente na sinabayan ng aberya sa 3 malalaking coal power plants.
Ilang bahagi ng Mindanao ang naperwisyo ng malalakas na ulan. Bumagsak ang isang tulay sa Calyawa, Buhangin District sa Davao City. Ayon sa mga residente, bumigay ang mga tinatawag na approach ng tulay habang rumaragas ang ilog sa gitna ng pag-uulan nitong Lunes ng gabi. Hindi madaanan ng tulay, kaya pinapayuhan ang mga motorista na humanap muna ng alternatibong ruta. Sa Maguindanao del Norte, mistulang dagat ang malaking bahagi ng Barangay Damatog sa Northern Kabuntalan bunsod ng halos araw-araw ng ulan. Abot binti ang baha. Nalubog sa tubig ang mga palayan, maisan at iba pang taniman ng gulay. Pinasok din ng baha ang police station, mosque at compound ng munisipyo. Ilang residente na ang pansamantalang lumikas.
May mga sama ng panahon na posible pang humabol bago matapos ang buwan ng Mayo. Sa forecast ng Pag-asa, may 3 low pressure area na maaaring mabuo sa Pacific Ocean mula May 25 hanggang May 31. Isa po sa mga posibleng LPA ay mabubuo sa loob ng Philippine Area of Responsibility. Mababa ang tsansa nitong maging bagyo. Lalapit din sa PAR ang 2 iba pang LPA. Mga kapuso, maaari pang magbago ang mga datos na yan sa mga susunod na araw o linggo, kaya manatiling tumutok lamang sa weather updates. Sa ngayon po ay easterlies ang maaaring magpaulan sa ilang lugar sa ating bansa sa gitna man yan ng mainit na panahon ayon sa Pag-asa. Partikular na apektado nito ang Southern Luzon at Visayas. Makakaasa muli sa mga local thunderstorm ang iba pang bahagi ng bansa. Nakataas po ngayon ang thunderstorm watch dito sa Metro Manila, Bulacan, Rizal, Laguna at Cavite. Posible ang biglaang ulan na may pagkulog at pagkidlat hanggang mamayang alas 10 ng gabi. Sa kabila niyan, posibleng pumalo sa danger level na 45 degrees Celsius ang heat index ngayong araw sa San Ildefonso, Bulacan. 44 degrees Celsius sa Etiague, Isabela, Daet, Camarines Norte, Vera, Catanduanes, Masbate City, Cuban, Sorsogon, at sa Catarman, Northern Samar. 43 degrees Celsius naman sa Dagupan, Pangasinan, at 13 iba pang lugar sa bansa. Danger level din ang 42 degrees Celsius na posibleng heat index sa Lawag, Ilocos Norte at sa 18 iba pang lugar. Extreme caution level naman ang 41 degrees Celsius na posibleng alinsangan sa Pasay City at 11 pang lugar sa bansa. 40 degrees Celsius naman sa Sinait, Ilocos Sur at sa 10 iba pang lugar.
Iginiit ng DILG at PNP na walang nangyaring pag-atake sa Senado noong May 13. Batayan sa nakalap na CCTV footages sa loob ng Senado at sa GSIS building nang mangyari ang pamamaril. Wala pang pahayag dyan si Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano. Balita ng ni Ivan Mayrina.
Ito ang makuha ng CCTV na mangyari ang putukan sa Senado noong Miyerkules, May 13. Kita ng mga tauhan ng Office of the Senate Sergeant at Arms o OSAA, ang mga taga-NBI na nasa GSIS.
General Plasca called in the OSAA operatives, including the PNP and the Marines, and gave the order to lock and load. In his order, you could see the Marines were cocking their guns. So it was lock and load. After which he proceeded to the hallway leading to the doorway where the NBI were previously reconnoitering. General Plasca did it in full view of the press. In normal situations, if there is a perceived confrontation, you will clear the building of all personnel because of possible stray fire. However, he allowed them to follow.
Maya-maya makikita si Acting Senate Sergeant at Arms Mau Aplasca na una nagpaputok.
Mind you, there was nobody there.
Gumanti ng putok kay sa NBI agent habang umaatras palayo sa mga taga-OSAA. Cover fire ang tawag dito ng pulisya hanggang sa nasundan pa ito ng sunod-sunod na putok ng baril. 44 na basyong nakuha ng pulisya na karamihan daw ay nanggaling sa loob ng Senado o sa pwesto ng OSAA.
Per our ballistics examination, those 44 fired cartridges came from four firearms. So meaning, meron tayong 4 na shooter.
Bukod kay Aplasca, tukoy na raw nila ang iba pang nagpaputok ng baril. Inilabas din ng PNP ang CCTV sa GSIS. Nasa 29 na mga taga-NBI ang nakadeploy sa GSIS, nakatabi lang ng Senado. Malinaw daw na hindi naka-tactical gear o wala sa formang makikipagbakbakan ng mga taga-NBI. Taliwas na naging galaw ng OSAA at ng mga kasama nilang Marines. Kasunod daw ito ng hiling ni GSIS President Arnulfo Veloso na naalarma sa mga nangyayari sa Senado at matapos manawagan ng suporta ni Senador Bato de la Rosa. May mga lagusan kasi mula sa Senado papasok sa GSIS at malalagay sa peligro ang mga mamahaling painting na nasa loob at ang seguridad ng gusali kapag nagkagulo sa Senado. Pero bago pa raw yan, umaga pa lang, ay may ginagawa ng pagpapainting ng seguridad ng GSIS sa kanilang mga lagusan. Alam daw ito ng maintenance management ng GSIS at Senado.
They had duly informed the maintenance of the Senate that there was going to be drill work going on in all the doors of the Senate of the GSS connecting to the Senate. So, hindi gulatan to
At base raw sa resulta ng kanilang investigasyon, malinaw niya na walang nangyaring pag-atake sa Senado.
All evidence points that there was no attack on the Senate. I would like to repeat, all evidence points that there was no attack on the Senate.
Taliwas ito sa nauna na iginiit ni Senate President Alan Peter Cayetano.
I don't think there's any question
The Senate is under attack. Was under attack.
Isa raw gun-related incident ang nangyari. Sa kabila ng supina na isumite ang kanyang ginamit na baril, hindi raw sumipot sa CIDG si Aplaska. Sinisikap namin makuha ang kanyang panig. Ngayon din si Cayetano tungkol sa mga pahayag ng DILG. Naniniwala rin si Senador Raffy Tulfo na walang nangyaring pag-atake.
Nagkaroon ng kaguluhan dahil may nagpaputok. Doon naman nag-umpisa eh. So, literally, if you look at the perspective on a military perspective, for me, walang attack doon. Kasi, nag-warning shot, sabi ni Sergeant Arms eh. Tapos ngayon, kumanti itong isa. So sila lang ang nag-aaway, dalawa. Walang kinalaman yung mga senators.
Panawagan ng mga senador, magkaroon ng malawak, impartial at komprehensibong investigasyon.
Just to be fair, I want to see the independent investigation. Meaning dapat ang Senado rin maimbestigahan. Of course, NBI dapat rin maimbestigahan para bantay. And ang importante yung malaman natin kung sino yung mga may gumawa nito or nagkamali. At i-reforms, paano natin maiwasan to? Kasi ayaw na natin maiwasan to eh. Buti na lang walang nasaktan. Ayaw natin maulit to.
Hawak na rin daw ng pulisya pero hindi pinakita ang pinakamahalaga ebidensya. Ang pagsakay umano ni De La Rosa sa puting SUV na pag-aari ni Senador Robin Padilla. Ang puting SUV yung sasakyan na kuhanan ng GMA News na lumabas sa Senado noong alas 2:30 na madaling araw noong May 14.
Sasakyan ko po yan.
Kinumpirma ni Padilla na sa kanya ito. Sa parayam ng 24 oras, binigyan din ng DOJ na ang paglabas si Senador De La Rosa sa Senado ay nangyari habang siya ay nasa protective custody nito.
The Fortuner, white Fortuner, and personalities going out from the Senate, particularly makita natin doon ang Senator Bato and Senator Padilla, and going to the vehicle na Fortuner. Makita na natin yung video nun.
Simpleng pagkakaintindi po namin, no? Nung sinabing nasa protective custody nila, nasa kanila si Senator Bato. So, kaya pag wala na yung legal impediment to serve yung arrest warrant, di ba? Dapat, pag hiningi sa kanila ng Department of Justice, ready dapat ang Senadong i-turn over si Senator Bato.
Ivan Mayrina nagbabalita para sa GMA News.
Huli ka ang paghablot ng isang lalaki sa hikaw ng isang babae sa Quezon City. Ang suspect na aresto matapos humangga sa isang truck habang tumatakas. Balita natin ni James Agustin.
Naglalakad lang ang lalaki na nakasuot ng brown na t-shirt na nauna sa CCTV sa bahagi ito ng Barangay Balingga sa Quezon City. Masdan naman ang babae naglalakad din habang may hawak na payong. Sa isa pang anggulo ng CCTV, huminto ang lalaki malapit sa kanto. Pinauna niya payong. Pagkaliko ng babae, dinablot ng lalaki ang tima. Hinabol pa niya ang suspect. Nakalaunay bumangga sa umaandar na truck habang
habang naglalaro sa kanyang trabaho at sasakay minanmanan na siya ng suspect at doon na naganap yung krimen.
Sugatan ng 34 anyos sa suspect. Tamo rin ang sugat sa kanyang tenga ang 28 anyos na biktima.
Pinuntahan na siya ng mga concerned citizen. Yung mobil natin ng mobil ng Laloma ay nagpapatrolya at doon na siya na-arresto.
Nabawi sa suspect ang hinablot na hikaw na nagkakalaga ng mahigit 22,000 pesos. Sa imbestigasyon na pag-alaman na ito na ang ikawalong beses na naaresto ng suspect. Karamihan sa kanyang kaso ay pagnanakaw. Mayroon ding may kinalaman sa droga at iligal na pagsusugat.
Ngayon po, yung mga kaso niya ay on trial at yung iba naman nakapag-bail siya at iba naman yung hindi na naituloy ng mga biktima.
Ito lang ang pag-isya ko po eh. Nakomment po.
Maharap ang suspect sa reklamong robbery. James Agustin nagbabalita para sa GMA News.
May lead na raw ang National Bureau of Investigation kung nasaan ngayon si Senador Bato de la Rosa.
We have a lead kung nasaan talaga pero in the meantime, which we will suspend yung announcement kung nasaan talaga siya. There is a valid warrant of arrest. He is now considered fugitive from justice.
Huling nakita si De La Rosa sa loob ng Senado noong nakaraang linggo nang magkaroon ng putukan doon. Sabi ni Matibag, kung may dapat magpaliwanag, dapat si Senador Robin Padilla na huling kasama raw ni De La Rosa. Sa sasakyan umano ni Padilla sumakay si De La Rosa palabas ng Senado madaling araw noong May 14, ilang oras matapos ang putukan. Patuloy raw ang pag-monitor ng NBI sa kinaroroonan ni De La Rosa. Patay ang isang senior citizen matapos mabangga ng isang SUV sa Mangaldan, Pangasinan. Kita sa CCTV ang paglalakad sa gilid ng kalsada ng 83 anyos na babae. Hindi pedestrian lane ang tinawiran niya at doon nabangga ng sasakyan. Base sa investigasyon, nag-overtake ang SUV sa isang tricycle at nang makabalik sa linya ay nagulat na lamang ang driver sa tumatawid na lola. Nakausap na ng SUV driver ang mga kaanak at biktima at nangakong tutulong sa gastusin nila, kabilang ang pagpapalibing. Hindi na nagsampa ng reklamo ang mga naulila ng biktima.
Wednesday latest mga mare at pare, ready na ang makipagbakbakan ng cast members ng upcoming Kapuso action series na Task Force Firewall. In character ang ilan sa kanila nang mag-demo ng fighting stunt sa MediaCon ng series kung saan present ang inyong pare. Full support ang cast members sa MediaCon, bida riyan sina Kylie Padilla, Jack Roberto, Buboy Villar, Kailin Alcantara at Miguel Dan Felix. Ikinuwento nila ang bawat misyon ng kanilang mga karakter na dapat abangan ng mga kapuso sa Lunes, May 25 sa GMA Prime. May chika rin sa inyong mare sina Kylie at Miguel tungkol sa buwis buhay stunt nila na pagrapel sa building.
Yung mga harness stunts, matagal ko nang ginagawa, bata pa lang ako. But iba kasi yung bababa ka ng mula 15th floor. 17th. So, iba yung kaba nun. Nakakatakot talaga, hindi siya birong stunt. Although, dinouble check naman yung safety namin.
Nakakatakot pero yun nga, mas madali siyang gawin pag may kasama. So, na-enjoy ko rin naman. And kami ni Kylie kasi gagawin naman namin lahat kahit mahirap para sa show, di ba?
Patay ang isang barangay tanod sa Dasmariñas, Cavite matapos pagbabarilin ng isang motorcycle rider. Nasawi rin ang isang tinderang nadamay sa krimen. Balitang hatid ni Bam Alegre.
Tulikam sa CCTV ang motorcycle rider na nakaasul at tila may hinihintay sa bahagi ng barangay Pergado 1, Dasmariñas, Cavite, pasado alas 8 ng umaga kahapon. Maya-maya makikita may sinusundan na siya. Sa isa pang anggulo ng CCTV, makikita na ang rider na nagpark sa isang bahagi ng kalsada. Bumaba siya at may hinabol. Natumba ang lalaking hinabol at tumakas naman ang rider. Kita nagkakagulo na ang mga tao sa paligid. Binaril na pala noon ng rider ang isang barangay tanod sa Pergado 1. Dead on the spot ang biktima na bibili lang sana ng agahan ng mga oras na yon ayon sa barangay captain. Patay rin ang isang nagtitinda na nadamay lang sa pamamaril.
Sabi lang namin ay nasa 7 yung basyo na nandoon at saka merong isang slag ng yung tingga na nandun sa parang bandang taas na. Medyo malayo, siguro mga 2 to 3 meters ang layo. Ayun nga po, base na rin sa ating mga pagtatanong sa mga nakakita, meron po isa na damay dahil nga po ang ating tanod ay bibili ng ulam. Yung nadamay ay tindera ng ulam, ng almusal. At nung pinagbabaril yung tanod, parang siguro nadaplisan yung victim dahil ang sabi nga sunod-sunod daw ang putok at tumama dun sa tindera.
Nasa pulisya na raw ang mga kopya ng CCTV. Patuloy ang backtracking nila para makilala ang gunman at motibo niya sa krimen. Nakunan din ang plate number ng motorsiklo ng salarin. Tumanggi muna magbigay ng pahayagan Dasmariñas Cavite Police habang patuloy ang investigasyon. Ayon sa asawa ng biktima, wala silang alam na banta o kaaway ng barangay tanod.
Kinausap ko rin ng kanyang pamilya, lalo ng kanyang asawa. Wala naman pong naikukwento na merong nakaaway. Wala rin siyang pagbabanta na natatanggap.
Bam Alegre nagbabalita para sa GMA News.
Mainit na balita, natanggap na ng Office of the Vice President ang summons ng Senate Impeachment Court para kay Vice President Sara Duterte. Kinumpirma ng OVP na natanggap nila ito kaninang bago mag-alas 11 ng umaga. Ayon sa isang Senate staff, naging maayos ang pagsisilbi nila ng summons sa OVP. Ipinapakita pa ng OVP staff ang dokumento bilang kumpirmasyon na natanggap nila ito. Nitong Lunes, nang iutos ng Senate Impeachment Court ang pagpapatawag kay Vice President Duterte. Inibigyan nila ng 10 araw ang bise para magkomento kaugnay sa Articles of Impeachment. Ibinahagi ng House Prosecution Team kung paano nila pinaghatian ang 4 na Articles of Impeachment laban kay Vice President Sara Duterte. Balita natin ni Jonathan Andal.
Sa sama-samang pagharap sa publiko ng 10 sa 11 impeachment prosecutors ng Kamara, buo ang kanilang kumpiyansa para sa nalalapit na impeachment trial ni Vice President Sara Duterte. Si Representative Jervin Luistro ang tatayong lead prosecutor.
The evidence of the prosecution is strong.
Ipinatawag ng Senate Impeachment Court si Vice President Duterte at binigyan ng 10 araw para sagutin ang impeachment complaint. Naniniwala ang mga kongresista kapag umuusad na ang paglilitis, dapat sumipot ang bise.
This is likewise her constitutional duty. People are waiting for her answers. I believe she should attend and present her defense.
Lahat ng kongresistang nasa prosecution team bumoto